You're listening to the Public Sector Show by Tech Tables, a podcast dedicated to sharing human-centric stories from CIOs and technology leaders across city, county, state, and federal agencies, joining in the conversation and touching the hearts and minds of leaders across technology today. From mission-driven leadership to cloud, AI to cybersecurity, workforce challenges, and more, never miss insights from peers and vendor partners across the public sector. And to make sure you never miss an episode, head over to techtables.com and drop your email to subscribe. New podcast episodes come out every Tuesday and Thursday, along with weekly Behind the Mic newsletter. And one of today's podcast sponsors is Tech Tables Plus, an engaging new community where you can have early access to never before released episodes, early access to live event recordings, early access to weekly 3 interesting learnings, early access to live event ticket purchases, no episode ads, and more. Plus 3 extra special bonuses when you sign up today. Bonus number 1, access to the CEO show. Bonus number 2, access to the Higher Ed show. And bonus number 3, access to the digital show. Join Tech Tables Plus today. As always, thank you for supporting the Tech Tables Network. Carolyn Staats, Director of Innovation at Sonoma County. Welcome to Tech Tables. Super excited to have you on this afternoon.
Joe, it is a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Today's podcast is titled IT with the Business Mind, and I'm so honored to be able to have Carolyn on today. And before we jump in, Carolyn is a huge basketball fan. This is why we connect very well. She grew up in Oregon, and as a high school basketball coach, I love that she also played. And I got to give many thanks to the Simply Gov team for introducing me to Carolyn. Big shout out to Gary and Troy for introducing me and hooking me up. Super excited for this podcast. And I think they wanted to join today, but I think they're at an event in Texas right now, actually, now that I think about it. But next time, hopefully we can do this in person and have some fun dinner afterwards. So Carolyn, let's kick this off. What I feel is like a pretty unique story with you is that you were sent to IBM's training center in Santa Rosa in the early 90s. And you had said to me that you learned IT from IBM. First, can you give us the background and the story on that journey?
Sure. When I went to college, it was for business, not IT, in fact. And my impression of IT was boring. It hadn't really occurred to me to look in that direction at all. So my background and my college education was all for business. And when I got hired by Birkenstock US distributor, they were looking for an IT manager. And they liked the fact that my background was really business. The only reason they didn't hire me, obviously, as an IT manager, but they did hire me in the IT department. So while I was going to college, my part-time job was working for a company and supporting the IT department. And they had an older IBM System 34, I think at the time, might have been a 36. It's so long ago. So I had some IT, but really my background was business. And my side job was an IT one to get through college. I moved to Northern California and Birkenstock hired me. I wasn't really sure what I was going to be doing with Birkenstock, but I didn't plan on staying in the IT department. And the IT manager was really fed up with a lot of the consultants that they had been working with. They had one consulting company they loved, but other consultants was hit and miss. And she said, "Would you be interested in going to programming school?" And I'm like, "Sure, you're in your early 20s. Why not? I'll go to programming school. Let's see what this is." And so IBM had an education campus in Santa Rosa, which was only about 30 minutes away. And over the course of the next 2 years, I ended up taking RPG programming, like all of their levels of RPG programming, and working with one of our consultants in CL and Query. I did database architecture, system design and engineering, operations, tuning. Like I went through IBM college, but I found it fascinating. And IBM at that time was coming out with at that time, it was their new AS400, and Birkenstock was getting one. That is literally how I ended up eventually managing the IT department and IT systems and operations. But I was also added to the executive team of Birkenstock USA because of my business background. And so I was one of the executive team members almost my entire tenure there. And that was the president of the company, who was the entrepreneur and the visionary, the vice president, who was the operations side of the house, the sales director, the marketing director, finance, and IT. And so I really learned from IBM certain things, but I learned from the business, how the two have to go together for success.
Yeah, no, that's really great. And if you're watching this video and you saw Caroline smile during that last segment,
is because before offline, we were talking about how I am the entrepreneur, visionary, creative for Tech Tables, not the operator for that. So you saw a twinkle in her eye. That's the undertone behind that. So second that I was thinking about was not so much technology, because it's just always changing. The AS400. I don't think I was alive then. But what principles did you take away from your experience at IBM and from the private sector you're using today?
That's a great question. So I would say the principles I took away from IBM was because I hadn't played with computers. I wasn't doing coding on the side. I wasn't doing any of that in my early years, and certainly not in my college years, except when I was helping part-time. IBM was a very entrenched company. It was a global business already. And IBM's approach to doing things is really taking the long view. Now, what's interesting is we're right in that period where we're about to step into the internet kicking in. A lot of personal computers. At Bergenstock, we set up the first network. So I was involved in going from token ring to Ethernet and a lot of this journey. So you're right in that window. And when the PCs became a dominant factor in the environment, you've got a lot of people who got into IT that were playing with PCs. So it's like you're getting the building blocks and you're playing with them and you're starting to build things. And maybe those things you're building small upward aren't necessarily scalable, supportable, but they become important to a business in order to function. IBM, on the other hand, because they had been in this business, in this industry with the mainframes and the really big global view, their approach was really more measured. You're really going to look at architecting something that is sustainable, supportable, that can grow, that can expand with your business. So you look at systems designed differently if you come up through a track like that than if you maybe come up the self-taught, which there's nothing wrong with the self-taught because you've got the creative people right there. So the self-taught where you're putting it together as you go along, both can end up with a great product in the end, but one is simply you're taking a different perspective before you're starting.
Yeah, that's really great. And on our intro call, we had originally talked about, we knew basketball was going to make it in here. And the plug that I see, exactly what you talked about, the difference is kids who come up with formal basketball training, they go to camps, maybe they play AAU ball, but they go to very structured stuff and they know how to play within a system. So when they get to high school, they know the system. At least they have the fundamentals of the system down. And I like to think of this as a Klay Thompson model versus you have kids who grow up, and in my case, play at Gersh Park on the street. So they have more street ball and it's wildly different. And actually those kids tend to actually struggle more in the system, just with running plays and offense and structure, but very similar. I was going to plug the sports analogy on our podcast.
That's a perfect analogy though, because it lines up in the more structured approach. You are trained to think with the team and your membership with that team. So you need that team to get where you want to go. In the other approach, because you're not necessarily in such a structured environment, it's more your success is based on yourself, not necessarily your ability to interact well with the whole team.
Yeah, that's 100%. So I wanted to dive into something that I'm seeing on a daily basis, and I know you're passionate about trying to fix, which is government systems across the US just being siloed, which drives me nuts as an entrepreneur. And so the systems are not talking to each other. The people aren't talking to each other. The technology's there. Oftentimes I found when I talk to people, the real underlying problems are either politics, ego, culture, mindset, you name it. We talked about homelessness in San Francisco. It isn't going to change. There's still homeless people in Austin or Miami or in Santa Barbara or you name it. It seems to me that like counties and cities and states have enormous pressure put on them to come up with these original ideas where the solutions are really already out there, or at least people have already been working on these types of solutions. So I wanted to dive into this kind of first principles approach. So like breaking down complex problem into its like most basic fundamental elements and truths and building it up from there. I know Elon Musk is a huge fan of solving problems from a first principles approach. And I was curious, like, what advice would you give to leaders and teams to break down this siloed approach across government?
That is such a big question.
I know it was a little bit long.
No, it wasn't too long. It's complicated and it's I guess it's simple. It's complicated and simple at the same time. First of all, government is always playing catch up. Government is always playing catch up. The private sector can demonstrate business value and ROI we've talked about, and they can go out and get a loan and they can forward a solution. They can build a solution. The government, on the other hand, has to build things as they get funding. So they have to apply for funding, then they have to get the funding, then they have to scramble to get the resources, then they have to build it. Okay, the funding came through right now. The measured approach that we were alluding to earlier is very difficult on the government side, even if you're just in one business unit like Department of Health or Human Services. And those are complicated business units with multiple funding streams, and the funds drop at different times. So you have issues there on collaboration, because let's say I'm getting funding to do something and I'm Human Services. And in order for this program that I'm getting 3 years worth of funding for to be effective, I need to partner with the health services, and I need to partner with housing. Okay. Now, housing and health are full-on departments running their own game. And they're running their own funding streams, and they're trying to line up their resources as their funds are coming through. And now here comes this one saying, hey, I just got this money. If we can get together, we could do this. Wouldn't that be great? And usually the answer really, Joe, is, yeah, that would be great, but I don't have any resources. And I've got this going on. I'm going to need your help on that. And oh, by the way, these require community partners. So then you've got outside the county. So you have this complexity. You have a complexity in funding. You have a complexity in resourcing, right? Very rarely is it a lack of wanting to partner. And then you have laws and regulations that are very confusing, and governments really, especially on the county council side, they're not big advocates of let's try this. It's more, if we just say no, we don't have to worry that we're breaking CFR 42 on substance abuse and information, or the CJIS, criminal justice information, federal standards, and just say no, or we need it in the law. Where is the new regulation from the government that says you can do this? You have a grant, but where's the law? You've got complexity there. So you have every reason for people to go, I don't have time for this. I don't have time. I don't have the effort. I have this big giant plate. So that's the complexity in a nutshell. And it took a while to say that because all those things are going on. On the simple side, people do want to collaborate. And where it can be simple is if the leadership decides we're going to figure out how to share data on behalf of our customers or clients. We're going to figure that out. That's actually what happened at the County of Sonoma. We had all the safety net departments starting to meet on a monthly basis, and they formed the Safety Net Collaborative. And that was health, human, child support services, housing, and all the justice partners, the jail. The sheriff said, I run the biggest mental health facility in the county. So you got the sheriff at the table, district attorney, public defender, and probation. So they all said, we know anecdotally, we're serving the same clients. They roll into mine, then they go out this door, then they're in yours over there, then they're in substance abuse, but they can't get a house, so they're back on the street, then they get picked up, then they're back in jail, they're back in front of the court, and now they're on probation. It's just this whole, and everyone listening in government is going to understand that. But here's what was simple. The department head said, we're going to figure out a way to work together. Very simple, not easy to execute, but it was that simple to do. They started meeting, and then they said, let's figure out how we do that. And getting them together and talking, and then starting to look at what have other counties done along these lines that we could look at and maybe borrow, build from, or learn what to do, what not to do. How have they forwarded their agenda in our state for sharing data? How, bigger counties, maybe they've gone over some of the legal hurdles. We can bring that back to our county council. In the end, our safety net collaborative said, we're going to hire the top guns in the United States on HIPAA information and exchange, because there isn't going to be a law that says, yeah, you can do exactly what you want to do, Sonoma County. That's going to be ironclad and protect you from a client saying, hey, that wasn't okay. And so we brought in outside counsel, and we built a privacy policy. But the thing is, we took each piece as it came along, and the key element was they decided we are going to do this. And then we partnered with UC Berkeley. So UC Berkeley, California Policy Lab, that's an available resource in the state of California. But I can also say that we partnered with Harvard government performance lab, and they are in the whole United States. So our team sent out applications saying, hey, we want to figure out how to collaborate on behalf of our clients. And would you be interested in working on this project with us? And then, we got free top tier support to analyze data and to prove, hey, all these behavioral health clients, this percentage of these people is sitting in the jail system, is sitting in human services, is sitting in probation, is sitting in homelessness services. It was absolutely compelling. And we sent de-identified data. We didn't give our PII information to UC Berkeley. We gave extracts from these systems, de-identified, and they did all the research. They ran all of that on their systems, and they came back and presented to our board. So we were able to make compelling arguments using resources that were free. But again, the desire was there at the top. And does an entity listening to this is going to go, well, we're never going to get all of our department heads. You don't need all your department heads. You could have 2 department heads decide, hey, let's do this. And they could build something small. I'm a big fan of pilot. We piloted this system. We had a disaster that happened at the time that we were putting all of this together, and that helped us move a little more quickly with the big fires in 2017. But you could demonstrate the ability to share information from siloed systems, even within one department. It only takes one department head. Health services runs so many different programs and services and different systems. You could do it there. You could do it in human services. So it's definitely, the simple part is there just needs to be the desire.
Yeah, I love that. Needs to be the desire. Starting small, that was really great. So the pilot, and if you can win over one person, then you can go win over 2 people, you can win over 5 people, you can win over 10 people. So I think that's a big takeaway, I think, for a lot of agencies who think, hey, I got to go win over everybody. I can't even win over everyone in my house for dinner at night. But you got to start with one person and build consensus on that. So I love everything that you said right there on the pilot. And I think there are going to be some folks who their first instinct is no. I have some friends where I'm like, hey, what if we no? And I'm like, do you see the Jim Carrey movie, Yes Man? I'm like, I'm a yes man. Joe, I'm in Orlando. They're like, Joe, meet me for pizza in Disney Springs. Yeah, let's do it. I'm just a yes kind of man. But if you get the initial resistance for no, give it a little time, do a pilot. Great advice. It's like actually fantastic advice for a lot of folks out there. I want to pivot a little bit to...
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, please.
You brought up a great point, the yes man. I work with a project manager. She's now a division director in IT, and she did some sort of a workshop, and she came out of that and she said, I'm going to try this new approach. It's called yes. And she was a no person before. It was like things would come in and she would be stating, here's all the reasons why this isn't going to work. Not that I wouldn't like it to work, which was true. She would like it, but this is all the reasons why. And she said, I'm just going to try this and see how it changes things. So when people would come in, her project managers would start coming in with things, and her initial instinct was no. She started saying yes. And how would we go about dealing with these? So instead of saying no, it was yes. And whatever kind of concerns, she'd put some of those out there and just let them sit and let them come back. And she's had tremendous results. So even if you're a no person, because not that you're risk averse, but you've just seen a lot along the way, I would suggest not becoming a yes man. That might be a drastic change, but yes and with your team.
I love that. I love the yes and. It almost begs a different side of the mind where you're asking the how question, like, how could we go get this done?
Yeah.
Not, no, it's not possible.
Here's why. Yeah.
And here's why. And for every news article or for every podcast right here, we can't do this. I got solutions in my back pocket of how we know we can go do this. How can we go fix this problem? So I love that yes and then trying to come up with that approach to problem solving. And I think it just allows you to take in different types of perspectives and opinions. I'm going to interview Kala Tokvik, who's the CIO for the city of San Jose today, actually in 2 hours. And he was on the podcast before when he was the CIO for the city of Irvine. And we talked a lot about how he was seeing organizations are just so risk averse. And he's constantly asking himself, what am I missing? How can we improve this? And they actually had it was like pretty fascinating. He had this like cloud strategy in case there was a pandemic that was coming along. And I'm like, that's funny, man. You're like a genius now.
Wow.
And so just preparing the city. And so when the time came, they were able to deploy everything. And so anyways, he's now in San Jose. Super excited to have him and Rob Floyd on together back for a second episode, which I know you're going to be coming back for a second episode with another friend. I won't drop his name yet, but we'll go make that happen in the future.
You know, on that risk averse piece,
yeah,
it is very dominant in government, because I think government is always scrambling. They can't do everything perfectly. And there's a lot of public outcry depending on what the different topics are. But in IT especially, it's problematic because what we know on the business side of things is that we used to be in a world, when I went to college, they talked about the 80-20 rule. And I can't remember, I think it was an Italian mathematician that came up with this 80-20 concept. But we all understand 80% of your problems are coming from 20% of your users. 80% of your sales are coming from 20% of your buyers, et cetera, et cetera. But that was in the late 80s. In 2022, we are probably in the, and I'll be conservative, 95-5 world.
Okay. Yeah.
So when you build systems and policies and procedures, so this isn't just IT, we're often following policies and procedures that are coming down. But when you build for the 5% of the time a system to take into account you're missing the prime motivator in delivering services.
Yeah.
Because you've now hamstrung the organization 90% of the time to account for the risk averse components. Okay. So it's very important to bring those out in the conversations when you have a chance with the CAO, with the board, is that this is going to cost you a lot more. And 90% of the time when we're dealing with our constituents, their process is much more unwieldy for 5% of the time. And what is the real risk on this 5? Now, I wouldn't take this approach with cybersecurity, let's say. There are areas where you're going to say, hey, we need to tighten every piece. But in general, that as an approach is more costly to an organization and delivers a lot less value in the end.
Yeah.
Because your process shouldn't be designed for the exceptions.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I believe it's the Pareto principle.
Yes.
Kind of 80-20.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. No, I love that. That is fantastic. You had this on our intro call, which I really liked, and I wanted to actually get your advice to our vendor partner friends. What advice would you give to vendor partners on productizing their solution with the best technology rather than just customizing everything? I know you're big on this API first world. I am too. It's just what makes sense. So love to get your advice for our vendor partner friends out there.
Sure. I'm not sure where to start on that one, but we can't keep reinventing the wheel. I come from manufacturing, Birkenstock. So there you go. Manufacturing, distribution, retail, web. So the whole supply chain, like the real supply chain. That's why ERP was created. Enterprise resource planning is all the modules around there, not just HR and finance. Okay, those are two modules in ERP. So manufacturing is known. If I'm making shoes, I'm not going to make a custom shoe for every customer. That's going to cost me a lot of money. So if I'm a vendor and all my solutions have to be customized, then I'm charging top dollar every time I'm giving a solution, because I have to do it from scratch for this particular customer because they're unique. When it comes to government and the approach we took in our access solution, we specifically said, we're not special. Sonoma County is a beautiful place to live, but we're not special. Our client, if he goes to the doctor, that doctor is going to look at the same list of vitals. He's not going to have different vitals because he's in Sonoma County versus San Diego. And the mental health doctors are going to be looking for the same things around mental health issues and suicide, et cetera. Substance abuse, same type of things. So we're not special. And that being said, we don't want to keep recreating things just because funding has come through the government that says, okay, now we want whole person care. So we want homelessness with severe mental health and a co-occurring condition, and we're going to fund it for 5 years. Okay, now we don't want to keep doing that because the clients are the same. When we looked at a solution, we were looking at other counties, and the solution we found was, so I'll give you 3 specific vendor examples in this story and why it benefited them. So IBM had invested with San Diego, and they built this hub, and they created schemas for all of these different source systems to get data into the hub. Now, was that the first hub ever built? No. Did Salesforce build things around sales and the CRM process? Yes, they did. Did mental health companies, did they build solutions like Avatar where, yeah, we can integrate all of the lab data and the EHR data? And so we've got a hub. Yeah, but it's very specific within your industry. This is sales. This is healthcare. But a solution that was a hub that took justice data and homelessness data and mental health data did not exist. And so they went down a road with San Diego, and San Diego spent a lot. We saw other counties that had done fabulous solutions, same type of thing. San Francisco had custom solution. And so we saw a whole lot of things. So we decided we're not special. We could save a lot of money if we lift and shift what San Diego did. Now, anyone who's been in IT, certainly as long as I have, knows any vendor that tells you lift and shift, or any elected official, well, we can just lift and shift what they did with PeopleSoft and set up our accounting the same. No, that's probably not going to work out. And that probably hasn't been a great experience for any of you that have had to go through that. It certainly hadn't been for me. But what we did say is that in this case, the client was not going to be different. The client who is homeless in San Diego has the same issues and the same problems as the client in San Francisco, as the client in Sonoma. So we do not need to meet with a vendor and design our hub from scratch with all these meetings, collect all these subject matter experts from all the different departments so they can say, this is what's happening with my client. Let's instead say, San Diego probably got it. They've been working on this for 5 years. IBM has predefined schemas for these systems already. Let's use what they built. Let's do that. Okay. And therefore, IBM was going to hand us off to a separate side of the business because we are a much smaller county than San Diego. We had a budget of 0. They had spent by that point upwards of $60 million. We didn't have $60 million. We didn't have a dollar. So we did get some funding. We did have an emergency, but our first phase was $2 million. And in our first phase, which was 4.5 months, there are videos and it's all true. We got data out of our mental health system, our substance abuse system, our CalWIN, which is social services, general assistance system, and probation. And we mastered, oh my gosh, it's so long ago now. I think it was 90,000 clients across 4 different systems in 4.5 months. And that's because we took what they did, and IBM had created an off-the-shelf product. So they productized, IBM bet on this hub. Now, it didn't end there because we said, hey, we work with a great electronic workflow product it's now called Simply Gov. And we use that for consent. And we want, if you're going to be our solution, we want that product embedded in this solution. And we want to use that for consent. And you guys need to be able to work together. So Simply Gov said, of course, if IBM designs an open API, we will interface with that open API and we will share consent data. And they built it and it worked. So we have partnerships across vendors. And by the way, that solution turned out to be multi-cloud because Simply Gov at that point was in AWS. So we were a multi-cloud hybrid solution almost out of the box. And then IBM continued that philosophy with the open API so that we could integrate other systems. Our user interface is a different company that's interfacing to that hub using the APIs. So when you've got, and that company, it used to be part of IBM Watson Care Manager, now it's Merative. But now you've got these big vendors, and what they're seeing is the openness of the API solution is actually beneficial to the customers, which is not their number one goal, of course, but it's beneficial to us. So San Diego built a hub, but we built a different solution with the front end. And we said, if you do this, because our solution had a cloud-based user interface, if you do this, other counties are going to buy it. And since it happened, Orange County bought it. That's a huge county. It's as big as San Diego County, Washoe County, Clark County. This is a whole different state. And Harris County, which is the third largest county in the United States. So it is beneficial to the vendors to look for that type of adoption and to work with government partners who are more interested in building a solution that's going to be around for a while, which means the government partners are already partnering. They're partnering inside their government entity. They're partnering across their government entity, because those of this technology with those other counties didn't just happen because IBM had a product. It happened because we are talking government to government and the vendors are at the table. So it's proven in manufacturing that you build it once and you sell it many times, and then your price per item goes down. So we don't have to prove. That's got mathematical proof, economic, like that's demonstrated. But it's not much different what I'm saying here with software. It really isn't. I think Microsoft proved that with something called Microsoft 365, Google Docs.
No, I never heard of any of
a
those.
platform. And then also it benefits customers, because Sonoma County doesn't have to pay for everything that happens in the SimplyGov platform or the Adobe platform or the IBM platform. They don't, or the Meritiv platform, because the other customers who are using it, they're funding additional efforts, and that product, whatever they're funding, becomes available to everyone who's using it. So we all continue to benefit of pooling our resources and our thinking if we're thinking beyond our own county. And certainly that's beyond our own silos.
Yeah, I heard when I interviewed Ted Ross, he's the CIO for the city of LA. They worked on an earthquake app with a bunch of cool stuff. And the state of California was working on something too. And thankfully, the state of California came to the realization that their app wasn't that good, and they just adopted what the city of LA had. And I was like, oh, that's great. That's a great use of resources. I'm glad we are not working. Would have been maybe a little bit quicker to figure out, hey, there's only like top 5, top 7 largest cities in California. Here's what we're working on. Different story, but glad they were able to figure that one out. There's just so much of that deduplication just for projects. Anyways, those are great examples that you provided. There was one where on our intro call, and I loved this analogy that you gave, and it had to do with building a system one room at a time, like government does this. Could you maybe just tell the audience that story, that analogy, and then maybe like what you meant by that? I think it would be very helpful.
Sure. We've talked a little bit about it because of the funding conversation. I was very new to government because I'd been in the private sector. And so I've only been, it's a long time now from private sector years, but I've now been in the government sector for a little over 8 years. And I was really surprised at the state of a lot of the systems. You've got a lot of these monolith systems that have been built over time, literally millions of lines of code. And custom solutions really have a place in that your customer gets exactly what they want. Now, an individual customer is never going to get exactly everything they want with all the bells and whistles in a package. You've got a trade, but you have the voices again of a whole bunch of customers who are experts in this area asking for things, and you're benefiting from that. The custom solution, a lot of the areas I saw in government offered a lot to the customer, but over time becomes very difficult to support and sustain. And when you think about how these things happen and evolve, it's often tied to this funding stream. You get funding for 3 years to stand up this program, and then that funding goes away. And then something new comes along. Okay. And again, government can't pitch a system, go to the bank, and then do everything perfectly. So the analogy I had was it's like building a house one room at a time. So who would do that? Who would take 25 years to complete their home? Okay, we have enough money this year to put a kitchen in and a dining room. Okay, next year we're going to add a bathroom. Then we're going to do a bedroom and an office. And then, oh, let's add another layer. And here's what we're going to put on that one. And then we're going to get our roof. And then in the meantime, electrical has changed from whatever old knob and tube to whatever it is now. Your wiring has changed from probably Cat 4 to Cat 5 to Cat 6. So you've got this house that if you looked at that house, compared with here's the money to build these, you know exactly what it would look like. You would never build a house a room at a time. And that's what government is tasked to do. Build your programs, your initiatives and your products and systems one room at a time. And that's a big challenge for government.
Yeah, that is a huge challenge, especially since any major goal, if you want to accomplish it, starts with the end in mind. And if you don't know the end in mind and you're building one room at a time, you're going to build a house to Narnia. I don't even know. You're just going to build so many rooms. One of them will just
It'll be the Winchester house.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it's not to say that custom solutions are bad. It's just to say that any solution that is built over time based on those reasons is going to have a lot of problems. And really, one of the biggest is supportability, sustainability, and even portability into a more mainstream application. So it becomes very difficult. There are a lot of governments that are still running COBOL. I don't even know COBOL, Joe. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with COBOL, certainly. I'm just saying we don't have a huge labor pool of COBOL programmers. So those are issues.
That's actually a fascinating separate conversation, but the labor pool matching what the technology, that's another actually common theme I've heard around the whole workforce hiring piece is we can't hire anybody that knows our tech stack, and the people who know it are so old they're going to retire.
Exactly.
Their words, not mine. They're going to retire soon. And so how do you train in the next generation? These are kids, I call kids, people like me, like 34.
Yeah.
No, we don't want to work on that.
Yeah, they're not going to work on that.
Yeah.
They actually aren't. It's not even going to be no, I'm not interested in that. And again, it's not to say that what those things were used to do weren't good things. It's just that how do you port yourself out of this into that when it's been built over 30 plus years? It's not an easy answer, and it's not a quick one either.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Another great insight that you had on our call was a little bit of a common theme of like IT getting in its own way. Love to hear a little bit more around what you meant by that.
It's funny. There's two pieces that sound like they're diametrically opposed in my mind when I think about, and I am part of IT getting in my way, certainly. One is find your solutions where you are. So a lot of times we go, oh, let's go over there and that solution, and that's going to be the way. It's like you're in the soup and you see the island and you're like, let's just get there and everything's going to be okay. But the island, you don't know, is wild animals and snakes and bugs. Also. So it's to leave here, you have to live here. So we're in the soup. We're going to have to deal with the soup. Okay. There's no quick solution to that. Sometimes we get in our way because we think there's an answer out there. And if let's just shift over to that, and then we're going to be okay. So that's one of the ways that we get in our way. One of the ways is the opposite now. So I just said to leave here, you have to live here. So be here. Don't try to shoot yourself over there to move forward. If your feet are here, you can only move forward from here. Now, the opposite of that is don't be stuck where you are. You're in soup right now. And there's a mindset that goes along with wherever it is that you're stuck. So when you find that you're stuck, how do you get yourself to start doing things differently? Not leave, but how do you do things different? And we all know the saying about you can't keep banging your head against the same wall and doing the same thing and expecting different results. So you have to deal with what you've got where you're at. But if you continue to be in the soup, what are different approaches you could take that could help you get out? There isn't going to be like a saving grace, like a crane's not going to lift you and move you out of the trouble. So how do you get out? And one of the things that I have found really helpful, I haven't tried the yes and. I've definitely been on the no side with project managers coming in, and I've been on the cheerleader side. We can do this. I know we can do this. We can get there. But it's to find people in your organization that are already excited about something. They may have been there a long time, or they may be interns that are in school right now and working with you, but find people that have some passion and figure out a way to give them a little time to be working on that within your organization. What I have found in ours is people love projects in innovation that I work on, and not because they love me, they don't. I'm not easy to work with or for, so I'll just acknowledge that too. All the people I work with, although we are a great team. But they'll say, oh, I'm going to school right now and I'm focusing on, this really happened, I'm focusing on big data. So if there's any opportunity for me to do something with big data. Now, this was a person in network infrastructure. Okay. So it absolutely was not aligned with their role or with, that was a different director. And so I said, I'll tell you what, I will give you opportunities to be in our Cognos meetings and to be in some of our California Policy Lab with UC Berkeley. They're definitely doing the big data AI. And if you get approval from your boss, and we can give you some overtime from my side and you can contribute. And I really had no way of knowing, would this person provide any value? But I just knew that this is a great employee and he's excited, and I'm happy to have anyone like that, even if it's just helping him with his master's program. And so we have really lucked out with people, even in other divisions in IT, saying, oh, I'd love to work on a project like that. And having other directors say, sure, I'll give you exposure to that, because maybe whatever you're doing there might help in our area over here. So it has worked out very well. It's also helped. Application development follows software development lifecycle and specific tools, right, around managing a project. On the application side of the house, more than 60% of your success is based on your customer. If you in IT cannot get a good subject matter expert, if they're not showing up to the table, if they don't like the product, you are unsuccessful, even if your team is perfect. On the network side of the house, what you have is this unbelievably short half-life in products, in ways of doing things, in especially cybersecurity and network infrastructure. You've got all these changes to keep up with, it like almost lightning fast. But so that's the downside or the exciting side. But the upside is very little of your big projects rely on a subject matter expert and a customer that is outside of your area. So when you're running a big enterprise project, there's a lot of risk. Everybody knows when the network isn't working, but you're not reliant on the health customer or the auditor or to give you answers and specifications and a scope of work. Like you're running that side of it. So what we found in sharing excited people is that one area is more comfortable with like this rapid changing pace and things that the other area is really skilled with, because we're dealing with customers who change their mind. It's like a homeowner telling an architect, this is exactly how I want the house. I want all the outlets here and the windows here and the doors, and this is how it's going to work. What homeowner could possibly design a house in their head? Now, the architect's going to put it down and then they're going to agree to something on paper. But when they walk in the door and they see that the window is showing the neighbor's bathroom or something, they're going to go, oh, I don't want a window there. You asked for the window there. You saw the window there. You approved the window there. We did user acceptance testing, but now you're in the house and there are changes. So this is a complicated answer I've given you. I apologize, but I'm very passionate about the ability for us to take advantage of people in our organization and where they're passionate, and then let them participate in other things. They have to do their core function, but if they're excited, they're going to find time to do it anyway. And you can benefit a lot just within your own IT organization.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I think Google has something like that where they let them work on their own projects once a week or something, where it just gives them that kind of lights that fire so they can have that passion. And then oftentimes it's like, for me, I love going on walks. That's actually when I get my best thinking done. Longer the walk, better the podcast questions. So that's, and when I'm in town, it's me, I guess when Jack was a little bit younger, I was strolling him in the stroller. Same concept of being able to like, that's when you come up with the really great stuff. And I know at the beginning, we were harping on IT getting in its own way. Business gets in its own way. I get in my own way. So no shots at our IT folks at all. But yeah, no, this is, I think it's fantastic what you layered on. I want to move to giving you an opportunity before we wrap up to talk about the Access program, the $2 million federal grant that Sonoma County received. Love to hear where you're at with that, where Sonoma's at with that, and just your vision and hope for that.
Oh, super. Well, I'm very passionate about Access. So we've talked about this. This is the collaboration system that we built using technology and schemas that San Diego had put together with IBM, and then using our other partner software, SimplyGov and What's a Care Manager, to help homeless. It's our high need homeless population. And we've had amazing success. We've found that it's really we were talking 95.5, 1% of the utilizers of the system are by far the gap between what they spend in services and the other 99% is significant. I don't have all the numbers, but they're definitely in we've had many reports go out. But I think for the listeners, one thing that was interesting for me is that in this particular project, I was paired up with the head of health services at the time, and she started working with our CAO's office. And it's really all counties have government consultants to help them with initiatives that are coming through the state, and also consultants on the federal side. I think the most interesting thing that's going on with Access right now is that we received a $2 million grant from the federal government earmarked for Access Sonoma County. It's very rare. SAMHSA hadn't done a grant in over 10 years. So it's very rare for the federal government decides we want to focus on this. Here's a justice initiative for this age range. And if they've got substance, they put together like a broad outline. They send the money through the states, and then the states say, okay, here's the general parameters, write your own grant and we'll dole out the money. Okay, so that's really the funding stream from the most part. So that being said, it's rare that a county is going after the federal government, but it worked. And for your listeners, what we did was we started having meetings. Our consultant for the CAO's office for the county, they lined up meetings with us with the state level, with Governor Newsom's housing specialists, with some of the legislative analysts from Health and Human Services. And we started presenting what we were doing. And because we were designing it as a roadmap that other counties could use, we actually got a lot of interest. And we must have presented up in the at the Capitol at least 5 or 6 times. Then we started getting interest from the federal government. We have discussed this with the Department of Defense, Department of Justice, sorry, not Department of Defense, Department of Justice, Substance Abuse and Mental Health. And we presented to Senator Feinstein's office and Senator Odia and Congressman Thompson. For our area, they actually put forward the Access Initiative and asked for earmark funding. And it was signed by President Biden on the omnibus bill. The ability to collaborate, not just within your county and not even with your vendors, but to start working on your government representatives can be extremely helpful in getting funds to sustain initiatives. And that's really, on the SAMHSA side of this, I would say that's a success story, because $2 million is not a small grant.
No, that is not a small grant at all. Yeah, that's $2 million, which is fantastic. And that is a great story. And yeah, I just love the work and just the heart of serving the people and really trying to, especially through the data piece, of really trying to fix that piece throughout, not just Sonoma County, but throughout the US. I think that's absolutely fantastic.
We have a partnering, I didn't even mention. This particular grant is going to fund transitional age youth. And this will be the first cohort that isn't focused on high need homeless. So it'll be 19 to, I think, 25-year-old youth that is aged out of foster care or has been in the justice system on juvenile probation. So it's a very important cohort for us. And justice has found that if you can intervene and help youth get on the right path before, I think it's 26, then they can get up and out of that situation. The success rate is extremely high. That by 26 and later, what they have found is that the likelihood of becoming the career criminal is extremely high, because by 26, 27, a lot of those individuals have burned the bridges to more functioning members of their network that would give them a chance. Here, you can live here, I'll help you out. And so they're stuck in a situation without a lot of options. So the transitional age youth cohort is going to be very important, and the government is super interested in it. That's why the federal government is giving us the grant. But the piece I wanted to say is that we're actually partnering with Harris County in Texas as well, because they, in their access initiative, one of their cohorts is going to be violence prevention. So they have violence prevention. We have transitional age youth. So in the Venn diagram, there are going to be components that overlap. Part of their violence prevention is going to be dealing with transitional age youth category. So they can be working on things, assessments and components like that in the care plan for their cohort. that we can be using in Sonoma County, and we can be building out different pieces with our grant that would be useful for Harris County, because we're also talking to each other county to county. We're going to get more out of our phases because we're going to have bigger resources.
I love it. That is great. And actually, I was thinking about the date. I want to say it's October 7th. Sindhu Menon's going to come on. She's come on the podcast.
There you go.
Which I got to make sure that I'm in town or in a hotel that has fast Wi-Fi. So yeah, awesome. This is absolutely fantastic time with you, Carolyn. And where can people find you online? You had a lot of really great stories, a lot of great info.
It's very easy if you Google me, but I would Google Access Sonoma County. That's really where a lot of the information is. Yeah.
Got it. Love it. Awesome. We're going to share that in the show notes, and we're super excited to share this story and the work you're doing. And I'm looking forward to having you on for a part 2. It's going to be a ton of fun.
All right. It's been a pleasure. You do a great show, Joe. Thank you.
You're listening to the Public Sector Show by Tech Tables, a podcast dedicated to sharing human-centric stories from CIOs and technology leaders across the city, county, state, and federal agencies, joining in the conversation and touching the hearts and minds of leaders across technology today. From mission-driven leadership to cloud, AI to cybersecurity, workforce challenges, and more. Never miss insights from peers and vendor partners across the public sector. And to make sure you never miss an episode, head over to techtables.com and drop your email to subscribe. New podcast episodes come out every Tuesday and Thursday, along with weekly Behind the Mic newsletter. And one of today's podcast sponsors is Tech Tables Plus, an engaging new community where you can have early access to never before released episodes, early access to live event recordings, early access to weekly 3 interesting learnings, early access to live event ticket purchases, no episode ads, and more. Plus 3 extra special bonuses when you sign up today. Bonus number 1, access to the CEO show. Bonus number 2, access to the Higher Ed show. And bonus number 3, access to the digital show. Join Tech Tables Plus today. As always, thank you for supporting the Tech Tables Network.